Benjamin Franklin is well known as one of the founding fathers of America. But there was another side to this renowned statesman. He was a polymath, someone who has in-depth knowledge of numerous subjects. Franklin was a writer, publisher, scientist, and inventor who continually reinvented himself. Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston, Massachusetts on January 17, 1706, to candlemaker Josiah Franklin and his second wife, Abiah Folger. He was their 8th child and final son. He also had 7 half-siblings from his father's first marriage. At the time of his birth, Boston was already a thriving seaport, filled with sailors, merchants, preachers, and prostitutes. Growing up next to the Charles River, he enjoyed swimming, and early on, the inventor in him tinkered with ways to glide through the water more quickly. He made his own version of fins. His were 2 wooden hand paddles. When Franklin was 6, his family moved from a tiny 2-bedroom house to a larger home in the heart of Boston. This allowed his father to entertain interesting dinner guests, which Benjamin later remarked helped to improve the minds of his children. As for his formal education, Benjamin didn't have much. His father only had enough money to send him to school for 2 years, squashing the expectation of his son going to Harvard in the hopes of eventually joining the clergy. So Benjamin's formal education ended when he was just 10 years old. Someone wondered whether he would have been as great of a scientist as Sir Isaac Newton if he received more of an education. But what Franklin lacked in formal schooling, he made up for with his passion for reading. He even stopped eating meat and became a vegetarian, in part so he could save to buy more books. His love of reading and writing flourished further when he worked at his brother James' printing shop as an apprentice. He even got a chance to publish his own articles for his brother's newspaper, one of the first in America, under the pseudonym Mrs. Silence Dogood. When he was 17 years old, Franklin left Boston for New York, hoping to break out on his own and find work as a printer. But he didn't have any luck, so he went further south to Philadelphia, which was then the largest city in America. He worked in several print shops around town, and later for a Philadelphia merchant. By that time, Benjamin was tall, muscular, comfortable with any company he kept, and very charming. He boarded at the Reed family home and fell in love with 15-year-old Deborah Reed. Deborah's mother refused to allow their marriage because he didn't have a penny to his name. He continued courting Deborah, and years later, they entered into a common-law marriage, and she ended up raising his illegitimate son William, whom he had with an unknown woman. Deborah and Benjamin had 2 other children, a son Francis, who died of smallpox at the age of 4, and a daughter named Sarah. Franklin spent his 20s helping to improve the community in Philadelphia. He formed the Junto, a club consisting of young men from diverse backgrounds that met on Friday evenings to discuss morals, politics, philosophy, and science. They discussed questions like, have you lately observed any encroachment on the just liberties of the people? The Junto meetings were modeled off English coffee houses, which Franklin knew well, having worked in a printing shop in London for a time. Members loved to read and decided to pool their money to buy books that everyone could take their turn enjoying. They created America's first lending library, the Library Company of Philadelphia. Franklin later became the publisher of the Pennsylvania Gazette, which served as a voice of opposition to British colonial rule. Not only did he print the paper, he often contributed to it, like this political cartoon depicting a snake in pieces, called Join or Die, that was meant to rally the American colonies together. Each piece of the snake represented a colony, though there were 13 colonies, yet only 8 pieces, because he grouped some colonies together. He also used his newspaper to write about his inventions, including his famous experiments with electricity. With the help of his son William, he attached a wire to the top of a kite, which picked up an electric charge from thunderstorms and conducted electricity all the way down the wet kite string. This led to his invention of the lightning rod, which protects houses from lightning when it carries the electric charge harmlessly to the ground without burning the house down. Franklin's groundbreaking work on electricity made him famous. That name recognition would come in handy, as he was tasked with convincing the French to support American independence. He spent several years stationed near Paris as America's first diplomat. His popularity and diplomatic skills apparently paid off. France sent troops and supplies to aid the colonies during the Revolutionary War and formally recognized the US as a sovereign nation. Franklin was appointed Postmaster General during the war, and in that role was responsible for making sure mail was delivered as quickly as possible by horseback. That was a crucial line of communication that held the 13 colonies together. Despite all the hats he wore, Franklin somehow found time to devise inventions throughout his life. He created bifocal glasses, which have 2 halves, the upper for distance, the lower for reading. The Franklin stove was a metal-lined fireplace that provided more heat and less smoke than the open fireplaces used at the time. One of his more unusual inventions was his beloved glass harmonica. He worked with the glassblower to create the musical instrument, inspired by musicians who passed their fingers around the brims of glasses filled with water. It was very popular during his time. Mozart even composed music for it. If inventing weren't enough, he also had a major influence on the science of demography, or studies of the population. He took notes on population growth and realized the American population was the fastest growing on Earth and would surpass that of England in a century. His writing on the subject was not without controversy. In an essay, he wrote, "Why increase the sons of Africa by planting them in America, where we have so fair an opportunity, by excluding all blacks and tawnies, of increasing the lovely white and red? But perhaps I am partial to the complexion of my country, for such kind of partiality is natural to mankind." Like many of his time, Franklin owned slaves and viewed them as inferior to white Europeans. But in his later years, he became a vocal proponent of abolishing slavery. He also didn't hold other groups in high regard. When there was an increase in German immigrants to America, he feared it would bring down the country. As the population grew, Franklin wrote about the importance of improving farming practices to meet the booming demand for food. When he retired from the printing business, he bought a 300-acre farm in nearby New Jersey. It became his experimental station, where he carried out projects in drainage, crop rotation, and fertilization. Looks like the founding father was now a founding foodie. He also introduced many international foods and plants to America, such as Swiss barley, Scotch kale, Chinese rhubarb, and silk. He was exposed to international goods thanks to the time he spent in London on diplomatic missions. He made many trips there from the 1750s to the 1770s, but would later sever ties to support the American Revolution. In fact, he had a falling out with his son William, who remained loyal to Britain. Franklin never forgave his son for, quote, "taking up arms against me." Franklin was part of a committee that drafted the Declaration of Independence, which explained why the 13 colonies regarded themselves as independent and no longer under British rule. He's the only person to sign all three major documents that established the United States as an independent nation: the Declaration of Independence, the Treaty of Paris, and the United States Constitution. After the Constitution was ratified in 1788, Franklin wrote to a scientist friend in France and gave us one of the most famous sayings: "Our new Constitution is now established. Everything seems to promise it will be durable. But in this world, nothing is certain except death and taxes." Throughout his middle and later years, Franklin was obese and suffered many health problems. He had a long history of lung disease and gout, a form of inflammatory arthritis that results in red and swollen joints. On April 17, 1790, Franklin died at his home in Philadelphia when an abscess in his lungs suddenly burst. He was 84 years old. It's estimated 20,000 people attended his funeral, nearly the entire population of Philadelphia at the time. Today, every year, tens of thousands of visitors toss pennies at Franklin's gravestone for good luck, and not to a famous saying attributed to him: "A penny saved is a penny earned," though apparently he never actually said this. He did once write, "Remember that time is money." Without a doubt, Benjamin Franklin used his time wisely. If you'd like to hone your skills just like Franklin did, and who knows, maybe become a polymath yourself, there's a great and interactive way to learn. Brilliant is an amazing tool for brushing up on your science, technology, engineering, and math skills. It almost doesn't feel like learning because you're having fun while solving interactive problems. Their everyday math course helps you see fractions, percentages, and geometry in a new light. My personal favorite is the Logic course, which helps improve your critical thinking skills. If you ever get stuck, there are hints to help you out and explanations if you get the incorrect answer. There are no tests on Brilliant, and you can work at your own pace. To get started for free, visit brilliant.org/newsthink or click the link in my description or pinned comment. And the first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription, which unlocks all of the courses. Thanks for watching. For Newsthink, I'm Cindy Palm.